Good afternoon, everyone. I am Jenny Starr, and I'm the Health and Wellness Specialist for the Kansas City Public Library. March is National Nutrition Month, and I'm really excited to welcome you to our program, Intuitive Eating and Health. Today's program is presented by Katie Hill-Stewart, licensed professional counselor and owner of Chill Therapy, LLC. She is a certified intuitive eating counselor and is pursuing a certification as an eating disorder specialist through the International Association of Eating Disorder Professionals. Katie provides mental health therapy to individuals struggling with their relationship with food and with their bodies. During today's program, we ask that you hold questions until the end. At the end, you can either unmute and ask your question, or feel free to enter your question in the chat at any time. If you're like me, you might need to enter it so you don't forget it. And then I will be monitoring the chat. And if you are not speaking during the program, please make sure that you are staying on mute to just minimize background noises. And with that, I will turn the time over to you, Katie.
All right, thank you, Jenny. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. Like Jenny said, my name is Katie Hill-Stewart. I'm a licensed professional counselor in both Kansas and Missouri, and I'm also a certified intuitive eating counselor, and that is through the authors who wrote the intuitive eating book. So I just wanted to spend some time today kind of talking about intuitive eating. So I wanted to start by talking about this assessment that you can find in the 4th edition. Whenever I show page numbers, I'm referencing the newest edition of the Intuitive Eating book, which is the one with the green cover from 2020. And this is based on Tracy Chilka's intuitive eating assessment based on the intuitive eating model. So this is a series of yes or no questions that I just want to kind of ask you to kind of get a pulse on where you might be with intuitive eating. So I try to avoid certain foods and fats, carbs, or calories. If I am craving a certain food, I don't allow myself to have it. I get mad at myself for eating something unhealthy. I have forbidden foods that I don't allow myself to eat. I don't allow myself to eat what food I desire in the moment. I follow eating rules or diet plans that dictate what, when, and or how to eat. I find myself eating when I'm feeling emotional, even when I'm not physically hungry. I find myself eating when I'm lonely, even when I'm not physically hungry. I use food to help me soothe my negative emotions. I find myself eating when I'm stressed, even when I'm not physically hungry. I'm not able to cope with negative emotions without turning to food for comfort. When I am bored, I eat just for something to do. When I am lonely, I turn to food for comfort. I have difficulty finding ways to cope with stress and anxiety other than by eating. I trust my body to tell me what to eat. I trust my body to tell me when to eat. I trust my body to tell me how much to eat. I rely on my hunger signals to tell me when to eat. I rely on my fullness or satiety signals to tell me when to stop eating. And I trust my body to tell me when to stop eating. Most of the time, I desire to eat nutritious foods. I mostly eat foods that make my body perform efficiently. I mostly eat foods that give my body energy and stamina. So when we look at this, if you kind of go back to each section, if you start at the first section, you might notice that if there's questions you answered yes to, that maybe this is a place where you find yourself struggling to give yourself unconditioned permission to eat. In the second section of questions, maybe you find that you're eating for emotional reasons rather than physical reasons. This third section, you might find that you, if you're answering no, it might mean that you're using external cues instead of internal cues to tell your body when and what to eat. And then if you're answering no on that last section of questions, it might indicate that maybe you're struggling with the body-food choice congruence. The main purpose of intuitive eating is to cultivate a healthy relationship with food, mind, and body. It is a weight-neutral model, meaning that the focus is not on body size, but rather healing your relationship with food. And that is from the authors of Intuitive Eating. So what intuitive eating is not? It is not a method for weight loss. When people come for intuitive eating work, I cannot promise that they are going to gain weight. They might lose weight. Their bodies might say the same. It's not what it's about, and weight is never measured or looked at. Sometimes we talk about struggles and challenges and wanting to lose weight, but it is not a method for weight loss. It is not a hunger and fullness diet. Intuitive eating is much more nuanced than just eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're full. And it's also not a diet, right? It's not about this weight loss piece. That's something that I really have to emphasize, because sometimes people say, well, the reason why I'm gaining weight is because I'm eating when I'm not hungry, or I'm eating past fullness. And that could be true, but there's a lot more to intuitive eating than just hunger fullness. And intuitive eating is not eating whatever I want, whenever I want, without regards to my internal sations. While you do have unconditional permission to eat with intuitive eating, it is definitely learning to develop that awareness with your food. So what is intuitive eating? So the 4th edition was released in 2020. This was originally by Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch. His first book was published in 1995, and they're kind of the ones who coined this phrase and coined this model. Ideally, we're all born intuitive eaters, or most of us anyway, are born with the ability to do intuitive eating. And often it's other external forces that take that away from us. So intuitive eating is evidence-based, a non-diet approach. As of this most recent book, more than 125 published studies show psychological and physical benefits of using intuitive eating. And these are listed in the back of that book, along with other research that is leading to further development of this approach. It uses 10 principles as guidelines. These are not hard and fast rules. They're just kind of, again, guidelines to kind of help keep you in check, maybe help you develop this awareness to your body without using dieting rules. It's not a certain number of calories per day, not a certain number of macros or types of food a day, just kind of these different things to help you get attuned with your body. So intuitive eating is learning to be attuned with your body, using internal cues versus external cues to help determine food choices. It uses the concept of mindsight, which was developed by psychiatrist Dr. Dan Siegel, regarding our capacity to perceive the mind of ourselves and the minds of others to help us understand inner lives and integrate with our brain. It is an active versus passive approach. It helps build connection of emotional awareness to physical sensations, and it helps us provide insight into ourselves and empathy towards others. And we're also using interoceptive awareness, which means the ability to perceive physical sensations that arise from within the body, being present in the here and now. Some reasons for intuitive eating. 95% of diets fail. Research shows that 95% of dieters will regain their lost weight within 1 to 5 years, with lots of dieters gaining even more weight than they were when they started. So sometimes I like to compare this example of if you were given a medication, let's say you came into the doctor for strep throat, and you were prescribed an antibiotic that only had a 5% success rate, and at the end of the 10-day period, you still had strep throat, you're probably going to blame the medication and not yourself. However, with diets, people tend to blame themselves and feel like the failure for the reason why the diet wasn't working, when really it's not you, it's the diet. The diet industry in 2019 was valued at $192 billion, billion with a B. So that is a lot of people who are making a lot of money off of people failing diets. There are health consequences of weight cycling. Weight cycling is a risk factor for cardiovascular disease, inflammation, high blood pressure, and insulin resistance. Weight and size are not indicators of health. Research shows that intuitive eating is associated with improved blood pressure, blood lipids, and dietary intake. There's also the health at every size model, which is the term is coined by the Association for Size and Diversity of Health, and it's putting the focus on health and healthy behaviors regardless of body size. So it's taking the focus off of weight. It challenges concepts of weight stigma, which research shows is present in the medical community, which often prevents people in larger bodies from getting the healthcare they need. And it kind of shifts to how might you treat a patient in a smaller body with a similar situation. Health at every size is supported by the research, and to date, there is no study that has found negative changes by using this approach. I am not a Grey's Anatomy fan, but somebody recently brought to my attention this clip that Jenny is going to pull up that kind of brings to light this model.
Yes, if you will stop sharing your screen, then I will share the video screen. Okay, we practiced this. Okay, let's see. Are you seeing it, Katie?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. Oh, you know what? I have to stop because I forgot to do the video clip thing. And we will not see a very good version if I don't. Okay. All right. Here we go.
Stop looking at the BMI.
Excuse me?
It's stupid. The body mass index is a fancy title and formula that was developed like 200 years ago by a mathematician. It doesn't account for differences in the density of bones or muscle tones or fat. It looks at numbers, not distribution. So stop looking at it and examine the patient.
All right. Thank you, Jenny, for showing that.
Sure.
Let me pull my screen back up. So again, kind of showing that the body mass index is not really a good indicator of health, and dieting is not a good indicator of health. So kind of keeping that in mind. Intuitive eating also helps us either rebuild our body trust or develop that trust with our body. Let's see, why isn't it moving forward? There we go. So here, this is also found in the intuitive eating book. We have the dieter's dilemma. We have this desire to be thin, and then we go on a diet, which often leads to cravings and feelings of reduced self-control, which might lead to a loss of control and overeating, which leads us to regain that lost weight, which then again puts us back on that desire to be thin, kind of putting us back into this circle of weight cycling. And this is originally from Living Without Dieting. So here we have the restriction pendulum, which I often refer to as the binge restrict pendulum. So on one side, you see that we have restriction, and that doesn't necessarily mean eating disorder level of restriction. That might just mean clean eating or being good or healthy eating, control and discipline, maybe not eating enough of a certain food group. And then we swing to the other side, and we often find that we might have a cheat day, loss of control, overeating, binging, feeling bad. So when it's pulled to one side, it has to swing to the opposite direction with equal force, similar to, a pendulum on a clock. So whenever I have someone come in and tell me that they struggle with overeating or binging, I'm often not only asking them what's going on in that moment, but what happened before that? What was your day like before that? Are you giving your body enough food and enough nutrients to keep it from swinging to the other side? And a lot of times we find that people aren't. Maybe they're waiting until the very end of the day to allow themselves to get enough food. One of the strongest predictors of weight gain is dieting, regardless of the actual body weight of the dieter. Dieting may cause stress or make the dieter more vulnerable to its effects, independent of weight itself. Dieting is correlated with feelings of failure, lowered self-esteem, and social anxiety. So some more reasons for intuitive eating. Greater body appreciation and satisfaction, positive emotional functioning, greater life satisfaction, unconditional self-regard and optimism, psychological resilience, and a greater motivation for exercise. Uh, Exercise often gets a bad rap when people think about things like the non-diet movement or intuitive eating. We're never saying that exercise and movement in and of itself is bad. It's when it becomes, a way to compensate for calories, or you're not fueling your body enough, a way to change your body, that's when it can become difficult. But exercise and movement in and of itself has lots of great benefits, but that doesn't mean you have to be, pounding on a treadmill in order to get the benefits out of exercise. So some barriers to intuitive eating is dieting, a big barrier. The more time you spent dieting and not listening to your internal cues, the more time it's probably going to take for your body to learn to rebuild that trust. If you've been on a diet that tells you you can only eat a certain number of red, yellow, green foods, or a certain number of macros, or you have to stop eating at a certain number of time, or you have to work out a certain number of times per week in order to get the benefits, versus listening to your body say, hey, I don't care what time of day it is, I'm hungry, I need fuel. Your body has learned that it can't trust you. And you might learn that you can't trust your body either. So part of intuitive eating is learning to rebuild that trust that your body does know what it needs, and that your body will trust you to give you what it needs. This eat healthy or die mentality, our society likes to put, that food can kill you or food can cure you, and that we have to be 100% perfect in our eating habits. Our country is obsessed with trying to eat healthy, and the research has shown that that has had a lot of adverse effects on us, and we are not necessarily more healthy because of the pressure we put on ourselves with eating. There can be a lot of guilt that comes with trying to move into intuitive eating. Maybe you feel guilty for not eating your health foods or following these rules that have been really ingrained in you, maybe since you were a child, because you were told that's how you were supposed to eat. Maybe you were told that growing up you had to eat all of the broccoli before you could eat a cookie. And so to say you can eat a cookie whenever you want, or whenever, if your body's telling you you want it and you can do it, there can come with a lot of guilt with that. There can be a lot of comments from family and friends that you might be struggling with. Maybe you've gone on lots of diets before and you've been praised for the weight loss. You look so great now. You look so much better. You look so healthy. This message that you look better in a smaller body can make it really difficult to stay in the body that you have and not try and change it. Food scarcity. It is very real that there are people in our country that don't have the money or the resources, or maybe they don't live in a place that has all the opportunities to have all the food that they want near them. So that can be a barrier. And that can be real or perceived. Maybe they're not willing to spend the money, or maybe they had messages growing up that they weren't allowed to spend money on themselves for food. So kind of working through that and what that barrier is. And then trying to turn intuitive eating into a method for weight loss or pseudo dieting, because it's really hard to let your body have unconditional permission to eat when you're trying to change it all the time. So really taking the focus off the weight loss and allowing your body to be where your body wants and needs to be. There is a body of research that shows that food restriction for the purpose of weight loss is not effective in the long run, not sustainable, and moreover causes harm, even if it's prescribed by a physician or a dietitian. And again, that's by the authors of the Intuitive Eating book. So, like I said earlier, there are 10 principles to intuitive eating. These are not hard and fast rules. We are never striving for perfection in intuitive eating, but just kind of using these to help keep us checking in with our body. So the principles that have a star listed to them, they don't mean that they're more important than the others. They just indicate that that principle improves our interoceptive awareness, versus the ones without the star mean that they remove a barrier from us using interoceptive awareness. So the first principle is reject the diet mentality. That's acknowledging we've been listening to diets or external cues versus internal body sensations to tell us what to eat. Getting rid of your diet tools. Maybe that means throwing away food scales, throwing away bathroom scales. You don't need those. Getting angry with the amount of money spent on dieting, right? How much of that how much of those billions of dollars have you put into the diet culture? Time wasted worrying about food, or maybe events you've missed out on because you were worried about what the food would be like. So letting all those emotions come to the front and rejecting the diet mentality. Honor your hunger. So that is making sure you're keeping your body fed with adequate energy. Prevent getting to a place that leads to excessive hunger and overeating. My family will be the first to tell you that I get hangry, and I'm willing to admit that I get hangry. So for me, that is maybe starting to see when I start feeling those hunger cues, and maybe it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but if I'm not going to eat until 6 o'clock, still need to have that snack, because otherwise I can't listen to my body. I'll have that excessive hunger and it'll lead to overeating. So learning to identify your signs of hunger and rebuilding body trust. Make peace with food, giving yourself permission to eat. Allow yourself to have those so-called forbidden foods that you couldn't have on your diets. Because we've seen before that putting limitations on food leads to feeling deprived and leads to binging. Challenge the food police. So challenge those notions that you're being good or bad based on what you're eating. There's a lot of morality tied into food in our culture. You can think of that when people use phrases like, oh, I've been so bad today, or I've been so good today, or I'm cheating on my diet. And, I have to remind them, you ate a cookie, you didn't rob a bank, you are not bad for that. And thinking that there's no such thing as good food or bad food. Discover the satisfaction factor. Often people find themselves grazing because they're not satisfied with what they ate. An example of that might be you're craving something sweet, and what you're really wanting is an Oreo, but you think you should eat an apple instead. So you feel like you're not satisfied with the apple. So you keep grazing on different foods. Until you finally let yourself eat that Oreo, because that's what you've been wanting this whole time. So these alternate foods are often just fillers and often leave us wanting more. The sixth principle is feel your fullness. So that's that body trust, that you will listen and feed your body what it needs at once, observing that there are different levels of fullness and how that feels in your body. That help you indicate when you're comfortably full and when you are ready to stop eating. Cope with your emotions using kindness. So acknowledge that depriving your body of certain foods will trigger that loss of control, like we talked about with that binge restrict pendulum. And that might feel like emotional eating. That might not be emotional eating. That might be your body saying, hey, you've restricted carbs all day long, so we need those carbs, so we're going to eat that spaghetti. That might feel like out of control, emotional eating, but it might not be. It could be emotional eating, so it's important to kind of acknowledge, where is that coming from? If you're not eating from a place of emotional hunger, why are you eating, and how might we address it? And that's not to come from a place of judgment, as much as a place of curiosity, like what's going on that we feel like we need to use food for comfort. Are we feeling lonely, and maybe we're feeling homesick and we're missing a loved one, so we go to a food that they used to make all the time? Well, maybe that means we need to call that person up, or call someone up, or reach out to someone instead of turning to food. I think it's also important to acknowledge that emotional eating happens to all of us, and that we don't need to blame or shame ourselves when we do emotional eating. Just kind of exploring why it happened. Is this a difficult day because our mother passed away and it's Mother's Day. Maybe that's why, and that in and of itself isn't bad. It's just realizing it's happening and not letting it be our only coping skill. So then principle 8 is respect your body. Bodies are all built in different ways. Just like someone that wears a size 10 shoe isn't going to squeeze their foot into a size 6, we don't need to try and change our bodies to do that either. So just accepting your body how it is and not trying to change it. It might change with intuitive eating again, but it might not, and just being okay regardless of what it does. Principle 9, movement. That's feel the difference. So focusing on how it feels to move your body, finding joyful movement that you like. Some people might have had really difficult experiences when it comes to the gym or gym class or different things when it comes to movement. So kind of working through that and acknowledging why maybe you don't like certain types of movement. And that doesn't mean you have to go back to those types of movements either. So moving because you want to, not because you have to, and not trying to change your body. And then the final principle, and there's a reason why it is the 10th principle, is honor your health using gentle nutrition. So that's not us pulling the rug out from under your feet saying, hey, you don't have unconditional permission to eat. You still have that permission, but also acknowledging that nutrition is important and your health is important. So just making sure you're making food choices from a place of authentic health, balancing your inner world and external world, allowing for a variety of food, making sure you're eating enough. An example that I sometimes use with this is if you ever go on vacation, you might find yourself eating a lot of fast food, right? It's not that we don't like the French fries. We like French fries, but maybe by the last day of vacation, we're kind of over French fries. And maybe something else sounds better, something that might have different nutritional value. So it's not so much saying you can't have the French fries or you can't have a salad, for example. Just how can I enjoy both foods, because they both offer different things and both have an important place in our meal plans. And when I say meal plans, I just kind of mean that as our way of eating, not that there is a specific meal plan with intuitive eating. So then there's also, in addition to the 10 principles, we have the stages of intuitive eating. These are not linear. It is totally normal to move back and forth between these stages. It happens a lot because there's a lot going on with intuitive eating, both physically and emotionally. So kind of acknowledging that those are going on. So the first stage is readiness. Are you ready to take on intuitive eating? Have you hit diet bottom? And so that usually comes with like this feeling of diet backlash. I can't go on another diet. I'm so over dieting. And some of those signs of diet backlash are you're becoming more preoccupied with food and body image. Food becomes the enemy. Feeling guilty when you're not eating diet foods. Urges to go, the urges of food that comes back when you're on that diet. The post-diet binges, sluggish metabolism, using caffeine overload for energy versus food, eating disorders, little trust with self regarding food, feeling that you don't deserve food, shortened time, like that dieting cycle gets shortened. That last supper mentality, maybe you're thinking, oh, it's the weekend and my diet starts on Monday. So the last supper mentality is, I'm going to eat anything and everything in this house that I can't have because it'll start on Monday. So that's kind of that's some symptoms that you're in diet backlash and you are hitting diet bottom and you are ready to kind of look into intuitive eating. Maybe that's where a lot of you are coming to this presentation today. The second stage is exploration, this conscious learning and pursuit of pleasure. Increase consciousness to acquaint or reacquaint with your hunger signals, your taste preferences, satisfaction and satiety. You begin making peace with food by giving yourself that unconditional permission to eat. You're honoring your hunger. You're recognizing body signals about how different levels of hunger feel in your body. You may find yourself eating more food than your body needs because you are experimenting with quantity required for satiety, and you've been deprived. If you haven't let yourself eat certain foods for periods of time on your diet, you might find yourself wanting to eat more of those things when you're in intuitive eating, and that's okay. It's unlikely that the way that you're eating during this stage will be the pattern that you eat for the rest of your life, or how you would want to eat for the rest of your life. You're just exploring and learning these different hunger cues. Crystallization. Thoughts about food are no longer obsessive. Intuitive eating starts to feel more natural, second nature. You're able to honor your hunger most of the time. You're still continuing that process and making peace with food. It's easier to take a time out during food and gauge your fullness. And you're working on separating that emotional component and working on the emotional components versus the physical signs of hunger. In the fourth stage, you're allowing yourself different foods, choosing nutrient dense foods because of how they feel, not because you feel like you have to. No longer have that need to prove to yourself that you can eat those forbidden foods because your body is trusting, hey, if I want that slice of cake, I can have a slice of cake, and I can trust that I will eat how much I need without maybe feeling like I have to eat the entire sheet cake. And then this is when, so that body trust is developing, and you have less critical food talk, more body acceptance. And then the fifth stage is treasure the pleasure. Less guilt about food choices. You're honoring and respecting your fullness. There's no burden in regards to exercise, and you're feeling free from diet culture. So those are the different stages. And again, they're not linear. You're going to move back and forth from them, and that's okay. Intuitive eating is not about being perfect. It's about listening to your body. So with intuitive eating, we acknowledge that there's different types of eating styles, and that with these eating styles, there are different triggers for it. So for instance, we see the waste not unconscious eater. Their triggers free food, and their eating is driven, influenced by the value of $1. So part of working through intuitive eating is identifying what your current eating style is, and those characteristics, and also where that comes from. Maybe you grew up and food was very scarce in your home, and that makes sense why your eating is driven by the value of $1. So kind of working through that. And maybe you're in a place where you no longer have to do that, and accepting that it's okay to spend more money on food than maybe you had in the past. So that's part of what also goes on in intuitive eating. I've been on a diet for 2 weeks, and all I've lost is 14 days. So just kind of reminding how much dieting can take from us. So with intuitive eating, there are some challenges that come with that. That I think are important to acknowledge, such as grieving a smaller body. Maybe you've been on diet after diet after diet, always hoping to find a certain weight, and realizing that, okay, I'm going to do this intuitive eating thing, and I might not lose weight, which means I might be in a larger body, and just being okay with that, but also creating space for that grief. And it might not feel very intuitive, especially at first. If you've been told certain things your whole life, it can really feel like you're going against the grain and doing intuitive eating. Grieving diet talk with friends. Maybe you have a friend circle that the first thing they do when you see each other is you give each other a hug, and you compliment each other on how good you're looking, and wow, you've lost weight. What are you doing to lose weight? Oh, I'm not eating this food or that food. This food is unhealthy. And that can feel really uncomfortable when you're kind of moving yourself out of that situation and kind of thinking, how might this change my relationships? How can I continue my relationships while setting boundaries with that? So kind of working through that. Comments from well-intentioned parents, Maybe your mom always told you, what was it my mom used to say? Too little to save, too much to dump, too little to save, too much to dump. That's what makes the housewife plump. And so, what does that, my mom was joking when she said those things, but how does that hit people? That might really impact certain people, and kind of coping with those comments. Maybe your parents struggled with being in a larger body when they were growing up, and they therefore placed really rigid rules on you because they didn't want you to grow up in a larger body, not because they thought it was bad, but they didn't want you to have those challenges or the struggles they had. Um, Maybe comments you yourself have made as a well-intentioned parent, doing some of those things. I joke, I made that comment about the housewife plump because I know my mom's listening into this presentation. But I mean, there are real things that people have said that are meant to do well, but have actually come across really harmful. And acknowledging maybe you've said those things and kind of coping through those emotions that come with that. And then exploring the emotional component with food and what is under the food. So addressing that as well. So some final comments I have here. Have compassion and grace during this journey. It can be a really hard thing, especially when we live in such a diet obsessed culture. So just having compassion and grace and using curiosity and not judgment. We're not here to place that harm on those people or have hard feelings maybe on people who've made those comments, or allowing ourselves to feel those feelings we have on people who have made comments about us, and working through those. And that it is very subjective, and what works for me in intuitive eating doesn't necessarily work for someone else, and that's okay. It's supposed to be unique and personal. And this is a process. A lot of times when we have used unhealthy coping mechanisms in the past, it's because they served a purpose. There might have been a purpose for sneaking food for you growing up, and working through that. There might be a lot of vulnerability in processing intuitive eating and why you haven't been eating a certain way in the past. So having that compassion and grace for yourself during that time while you're working on this. It can take a long time, and that's okay. It's not meant to be an easy fix. So it turns out as an adult, you can eat chocolate cake for breakfast if you want. There is literally no one policing this. So just kind of a fun reminder that you are allowed to make those decisions. There are no true diet rules. So this is a quick overview. There's a lot that goes into intuitive eating, a lot of exploration, but just wanted to provide you all with a quick overview. Here are some resources that are created by the founders of intuitive eating. So you see the intuitive eating with the chocolate covered strawberry. That is not actually an audio book. That is the creators kind of guiding you through the practices and the principles of intuitive eating. There's an intuitive eating journal, which has journal prompts and space to journal. I also put in here the older edition of the book, since that might be the one people see more often, since the other book came out in 2020. And there's also an intuitive eating workbook to kind of work through the principles and kind of do different skills and apply them in different ways, which is different than the intuitive eating journal. So that is all. These are my references. That is all I have. So I want to open the floor up if there are any questions or anything anybody would like to add. Thank you for coming.
Thanks so much, Katie. So if you have questions, just feel free to unmute and ask, or if you prefer the chat, go ahead and put it there and I'll share that out.
Okay. Katie, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yep, I can hear you.
Thank you. My name is Shelley, and I'm wondering, with all this stuff that you said, which, all of it sounds like me. I did just finish all the junk food so that I could take this class. And all of those, I have all the books. I have all the books. I don't really, like, why don't they all work? Why am I still binge eating knowing that this is going to make me sick, like I will pick out all the red dots and the orange dots from a box of chewy dots because I know those give me a headache. That red stuff gives me a headache, but I'm still going to eat all the yellow, blue, and green ones because they don't have the red dye in them. But it's always massive amounts of food or all healthy. I'm not in the middle. And what goes along with helping you, I mean, I know all the information. I just don't have the application piece. And when you talked about sneaking food when you were a kid, I mean, I have figured out, it started when I was a kid because I would come home from school starving. I mean, feeling very, very, very hungry. And we could have a cookie and a glass of milk, or my mom would bake bread and we could have what's called here a dinner roll and a glass of milk. But that was it. And we had dinner at 5 o'clock. That's what time you need to be hungry. You have to be hungry then. And you might
So
have
you weren't
dessert.
allowed to listen to your hunger cues because you were told when you have to eat,
Plus I
versus
was,
like maybe you
yeah,
weren't hungry.
and I was very, very skinny as a child. Even like into my teen years, I was eating like a pig because I wanted to break 99 pounds because all of my friends were, developing and I wasn't. And then suddenly, just before I turned 17, I gained 40 pounds. Like that was my growth spurt. And then I just felt, I've felt fat and had a very bad body image since then. And I mean, I know these things, but I'll go through these phases where I'm just not going to buy anything. Like if I want key lime pie because I love it, but it makes me sick because I have this dairy issue, I will buy the whole pie. If I'm gonna do something to my body that I know isn't good, but it tastes good or feels good, I'm gonna put hot fudge and caramel on my ice cream, even though ice cream makes me vomit. All that dairy stuff comes back up. So where's the piece that is personal? Like I don't know, a Jiminy Cricket on your shoulder. Where do you get that piece? That's it.
What do you mean the Jiminy Cricket, I guess, on your shoulder? Like when you say personal,
Like
because this is all a broad, what I gave is like the broad overview, right? What's triggering you to eat the ice cream might not be what triggers somebody else to eat the ice cream. So kind of seeing what are you getting from these things that you're eating that make yourself sick. For instance, when I had my gallbladder taken out, I can't eat queso as much, right? Like that's a food that triggers my body.
Right.
So does that mean I don't eat queso ever? Or does that mean I allow myself to have it in a certain amount? Or that I monitor how much I have, or only eat it occasionally? So it kind of depends on, is this a food you're eating because you want the food and it tastes good? Or is this a food like you're eating because there's something else to it? Like there's an emotional piece. So kind of fun. And if it's an emotional piece, why is that?
Right. I understand what you're asking, but I don't understand how to apply that to myself at any point in time when I always know that I'm doing this. I know that I'm doing it, but I don't know. It's like I also, and I know some of my eating issues are related to PTSD, but but I know some of them aren't because I don't think I was having PTSD when I was coming home from school and sneaking a whole slice of cake out of the pan because it wasn't cut into slices yet. And I would just keep on slicing and slicing and slicing. So there wasn't a whole piece missing, and I don't like cake now at all. But the thing is, I don't have confidence in myself for reading the book and getting it.
Okay, so are you asking like what other resources there are? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
What other components work in concert with the book? Listen to the thing. What's the hands-on? Like if you're in class and they're teaching you how to build a volcano, so they tell you how, and then they show you how, but they never let you do it. So I mean, how do you apply it without supervision, without?
Sure. So you can use the resources. I think I don't know if you have the workbook of intuitive eating. That's a great one, a great resource, and it's just called Intuitive Eating Workbook. And that has specific tools for each of the principles. That's something I recommend. The journal, again, has those different prompts that you can use to kind of look through the different things they have. And then there are also certified intuitive eating counselors out there. So both dietitians and therapists. So if it is like an emotional part that you're looking for and like that one-on-one attention, you can do that. So let me see, I actually have the website pulled up if I can find it.
While you're looking for that, Katie, I just wanted to show, I pulled up Hoopla, and we do have a lot of those on Hoopla. So we have the intuitive eating workbook. We have intuitive eating every day. We have the new version on audiobook and all of that.
Sorry to interrupt you. I don't know what you said. We have it on what?
At the library, we have Hoopla, which is an app that it's an electronic resource. You can get to it from our website, and it includes those resources, or several of those are in there for free so that you don't have to pay for them necessarily.
So I go to the library to look up Hoopla, to look up this.
I'll put the link in the chat for you.
And then there's also this website. Sorry.
I'm not seeing a link on my screen, and I know you're probably used to doing this a lot, but I'm not. There we go. Something says chat. Okay, I got the chat thing.
Yeah, I haven't put it in yet, so I'm looking for the link for you.
Okay. Thank you.
And then there's also, let me see if I can pull that up again.
I could just interrupt for a second and say, Hoopla, Hoopla. It's just an app that's provided by the library where you can get free access to audio and ebooks, and also I think movies and music as well.
Correct.
So that's where you would be going. You probably in the Play Store or something like that, you could find it. That's where I got my other library access to. It's called Overdrive, which is another way you can get books from the library for free.
Yes, I just put the link from our website that takes you to all the ways you can download Hoopla. And it's Hoopla.
So in other words, I have to get an app that I can keep on my phone, but I have to get it from the library. It's an app.
It's an app. Yes, it's an app. And then you can also use it on a computer as well.
Yeah, it's provided by the library. You don't have
Yes.
to get it from the library. That's who gives it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
so it's a free resource.
Sponsors it and provides it.
Yeah. Hoopla is something that lots of libraries use. So we have a subscription to it. And if you have a library card, you can access all of the materials on Hoopla.
So I could go to my library account on my laptop at any time and download Hoopla onto my laptop.
You can't, well, yeah, you will on your laptop, you'll just go to the website. So the link that I just put in the chat will take you to where you need to go to get that information.
And then Shelley, if you are looking for a certified intuitive eating counselor, you can go to intuitiveenating.org/certified-counselors. And I'll put this link in the chat here in a moment as well. And it has all these different counselors, both psychologists, dietitians, and you can search where you're located and what it is you're looking for. So if you're wanting some of that individual, like one-on-one help, that is one way to do it. Because with the
Excuse me for 1 second. I'm going to have to check out, but I just want to say thank you, Katie.
Sure.
You're really well presented.
Well, thank you.
A lot of help.
Thank you
I
for
appreciate it.
coming.
Thank
Thanks
you
very
also, Barbara.
And if you have any questions that I didn't get to, please feel free to shoot me an email. I'll be happy to answer any questions if I don't get to them today.
Okay. Thanks again.
So,
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
Shelley, if you want to hang on for like, we can finish going through. I can even show you.
Other people can have ask some questions. And okay, good. Because
So we'll hang on with you at the end.
All
So
right,
if anyone else has a question, go ahead and feel free to unmute or ask in the chat.
Hi, I have a question. This is Andrea Patterson. I came in a couple minutes late, so I apologize if maybe you went over this, but do you have any tips for feeding a family, like especially young kids, toddlers and preschoolers? I mean, just to like kind of, get them used to the whole thing of intuitive eating, meaning, obviously
Young age.
like, we're not dieting them or, giving them a specific diet or anything like that, but just to like, I don't know, help them like learn to listen to their body and like their hunger cues and fullness. And does that make sense? Or if you have like a specific resource to visit.
I do. There is a chapter in the intuitive eating book. That's where I would start. Just because I am not a parent, so I can't base a lot on my personal experiences. But I know that I believe her name is Katie Harvey. If I can look up her name, I'll put that in the chat as well. She is a dietitian here in Kansas City, and she talks a lot about raising intuitive eaters. And a lot of what she talks about is making sure you're offering, that your job as a parent is to offer a variety of foods and a variety of and like different quantities of foods. So that might mean that you're putting the cookies on the plate, right? Your plate of cookies is right there next to the vegetables you're serving for dinner, and you're letting them choose how much cookies they want instead of really influencing, like, don't eat that, that's bad, or we have to eat our vegetable first. So that's a lot of the places where they look. And then there is a specific chapter in the book that focuses on raising intuitive eaters. And I'll look in, there are lots of intuitive dietitians in the Kansas City area that can probably provide. Like their websites probably have a lot of good information, or again, if you wanted to do specialized work with them, that would do that. But I know Katie Harvey, she is local. I believe she's at Insight here in Kansas City, I believe in Overland Park. And I know she does a lot, and her social media has a lot. So I will look into that and see if I can post that in the chat for you. So that way you can at least kind of look into that as some of those examples. Does that answer your question?
Oh,
You're still on mute. You're still on mute.
Andrea, I think you're muted.
Sorry. Yes,
You're
that was a good overview of like raising an intuitive eater. That's like kind of what I meant to say. So, but also what book are you referring
I'm sorry.
to? That's okay.
Sorry, mine has lots of tabs on it. The entire intuitive eating book. So this one's the fourth edition that was updated here in 2020. It's probably more expensive than the older editions, but I know when I got certified, I was using the third edition, and it had a chapter in there too. I know the third one is available at the library as a free resource.
The audiobook of the new one is available on Hoopla, but not the actual physical copy. And another thing, just so everyone doesn't panic, I will email a resource list out after this with all of the resources that we talked about today. So when you registered, I got your email, so I can send that out.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. And I don't know, Katie, do you ever look at Ellen Satter Institute? I hear her discussed a lot when it comes to parenting and nutrition.
I don't. I'm not familiar with who she is.
So she's not technically Hayes, but she does follow a lot of the intuitive eating principles about like what the parents' feeding responsibility is, and then the child's responsibility for eating. So I'll just throw that in there. It's something to look at.
And for those of you, when she said Hayes, that stands for Health at Every Size that I had mentioned in the presentation. In case you're wondering what that acronym meant.
Yeah, I missed that.
Okay, great question. Really great.
Yeah,
question.
thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions before we wrap up for today? Okay, I'm not hearing anymore. I'm going to stop the recording.